Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be looking at the latest release, Dynamics GP 2016. And if I just flick through the agenda we're going to run through. So to start off with a brief introduction. Then we're going to be looking at the new features broken down by the different series. So one of the fundamental things is significant changes to the web client, which I'll come on to. Then we'll look at the system-wide enhancements, move on to some new features within the financial series, supply chain, and have a chat around some of the new features within project accounting. So first of all, just looking at the introduction, as I said, this is the latest release by Microsoft. It builds on the technical and functional releases of 2013 and 2015, and some of those were fairly significant changes as to how the application operates in the background, all putting together for a true web-hosted, multi-tenanted environment. Introduction of the web client is quite a significant focus for that. True introduction on the web client into Active Directory, use of multiple devices, and introduction of greater business intelligence capabilities. And if we look at what Microsoft are doing with that, they're basically surrounded, although every release there are around about 150 new features and new enhancements across all of the modules, and obviously not everybody sees the benefit of every single enhancement or new feature. However, some of the more significant ones are all about usability and productivity. So we're going to have a look first of all at the system-wide enhancements. So I'm going to go through these. I'm kind of going to flick from the PowerPoint through to Dynamics GP and just discuss these as we actually go through. So first of all, if we look at Dynamics GP, the home page has once again been enhanced and is going to continue to be enhanced. If we flick to the web client, all you'll notice is that we're now in a true HTML5 web client environment. So although technically, functionally in look and feel, for those who are using the web client, you probably won't see a huge amount of difference. However, the introduction of HTML5 versus the Silverlight client means that we've now got support for multiple devices, so that includes iPads, Android tablets, and also support across multiple browsers. So no longer restricted down to just Internet Explorer. We now support Microsoft Edge, which obviously is the fundamental browser for Windows 10, Safari, and Chrome. And some of the new features that we have within the web client is that we have the ability from the main menu here to be able to choose what role we're logged in at, choose what company we're in, exit into GP directly from within here. And also, because of the introduction or the integration with Active Directory, we no longer need to have a SQL login. It will pick up our user role within Active Directory, and as long as that's assigned within the user configuration within GP, it's then just full single sign-on rather than having to provide two logons, as has been the case previously. The other thing that we have within the web client, if I just click on here, so if I'm not sure of a particular window that I want to go to or a particular form, I have the ability to be able to search from within the web client for any form that I'm looking at. So if I want to have a look at anything to do with sales, as we go down here, here's my search results. So if I expand that to sales transaction, there's my sales transaction entry. I can drill down to the form directly within here. So no longer do I need to understand the navigation, although Microsoft over the years have made the navigation around GP as easy as it possibly can be. But for a new user, it's very easy for them to get to grips with the particular roles that they're doing and just search the application through. You noticed also that the forms have been fully made HTML5 available, so even though they're open up in the other windows, that will work quite happily within a mobile device. We also have fundamental options like the document management, the document attached. I need to actually pick up the document, that would help. Let me change this to an invoice, and then just going to have a look at the document. So all the document attachment options that were brought in GP 2013 are fully available within the web client, and I'll come on to talk a little bit more around the document attachment side of things and some of the new features that have been brought in within there. So I'll just come out of those two windows. The other thing that I've got is the ability to be able to action information directly from within my home page as well. Now this applies on the web client, but this also applies within the standard client for Dynamics GP. So for instance, I can go in and I can enter a purchase requisition, I can enter a timesheet, approve an expense, drill down on my reports, my links, and have everything configured within here. So I'm going to flick back to the main GP client, and I mentioned previously around introduction of greater business intelligence capabilities. So within here I have the ability to be able to integrate on my home page through to Power BI. Now, for those of you who are not aware of Power BI, it's a product that Microsoft have introduced. It is an Azure delivered or online delivered application. It integrates fully with Dynamics CRM, Dynamics GP, Dynamics AX, along with a whole raft of other applications. So, for instance, you can take information that's saved on in a database within your organization, information that's on a spreadsheet, and you can use Power BI to be able to report and create dashboards and drill down on the information contained within there. So for instance here, if I drill down within here, and you'll have to excuse me because I do need to log in because this is an online solution. It links to your internal Active Directory. And for those of you that are using Office 365 or investigating Office 365, that single sign-on is across all of your applications. So whether that's you're using Outlook within Office 365, you're using the core Office products, the ability to be able to share information via OneDrive, the ability to be able to use Dynamics CRM, and then Power BI comes as a solution that sits alongside of those. In this case, I'm linked to some data that's probably a little bit more relevant, and I can create my dashboard just based on the information that I want to see on a per user basis. So I can filter that information. I have the ability to be able to drill down on that information, see the underlying data underneath there, have graphical information, charting information, all controlled within my dashboard directly from within here. And then I can have multiple dashboards. For instance, if I look there, there's my sales pipeline. I can view my sales activity, my account analysis, my leads analysis, and so on and so forth, directly from within my Power BI solution. And the great thing about that as well, although we have the ability to be able to embed it directly within the GP client, we also have the ability to be able to view this information completely separate. Once again, this is mobile device compatible, whether that is your iOS, your Android, your Microsoft device, whether that's a phone, whether that is a tablet, and the applications are available to be installed by the various app stores, and then it's just a simple configuration to link it through to your account. Okay, I'm going to come out of that. So a couple of other little things that we have within Smart Lists. I'm not going to go through all of these, but some of the fairly fundamental ones is, as you're all aware, Smart List Designer has been a solution that's been part of Dynamics GP for quite a period of time now. And some of the things that have previously been a little bit frustrating around Smart Lists, so for instance, if I have a Smart List here, I've just got a filtered view, a favorite, and that's linked to add and part resort, a list of all of their orders and invoices, their sales documents. If I export that out into Excel, it now formats all the numbers as proper numbers rather than as text fields, which makes it so much easier if we're doing export solutions, if we're doing charting and graphing. There is less work you have to do when the information hits Excel. You also have the ability to be able to take a favorite that you've created. You can import and export smart list favorites. So if you have a solution or a set of solutions that you want to save down and you want to move across from either client to client or across multiple implementations, instances of Dynamics GP, you have the ability to be able to do that now directly from within Smart Lists. And also you have the ability to be able to take a Smart List favorite and from within Smart List Designer then copy that favorite rather than using the default view when you're creating a new Smart List. And therefore that means that you don't have all of the columns and then have to do the filtering and the restriction of the columns. It literally will pick up your favorite and create a new Smart List based on that. Another thing tied in with Smart Lists as well, and once again this has been a question that we've been asked on numerous occasions, is the ability to be able to put some form of approval of security around people creating Smart Lists. There's been a number of enhancements to the workflow capabilities within Dynamics GP, and I'm just going to look at one in particular for the time being. If I go into administration now, I have the ability to be able to create a workflow for people generating Smart Lists using Smart List Designer. And then that you can keep that into an approval process, and then within that approval process you can create multiple steps. Now, one of the other fundamental changes that we've had within the workflow setup is the ability to be able to manage conditions effectively. So for instance here, if I look at the step for approval, I can choose to whether this action is always required for this step. I can choose whether there is a criteria that needs to be met associated with that action. And then if the condition is not met, what happened previously within the workflow engine is that it would just stop the workflow at that point in time. Now what we can choose is the ability to be able to either continue to the next step, reject the workflow, or end the workflow path at that point in time. So rather than it being just a simple workflow engine, we now have the ability to be able to do quite significant nested steps within here. Another point around workflow as well is that what we can do is when a workflow, an action has been reassigned, what you can do is now configure the workflow to automatically notify a new approver that they need to act on a workflow that's in process. So the notifications can be sent to the new approver, it was delegated or as part of an escalation process, or is the alternate approver within that workflow. Okay, I'm going to say no to that, and we're just going to have a look at the document attach capabilities. There are a couple of additional configuration options that we have around document attachment. So I have a look at the document attachment setup. I can choose my default location for my document attachment, but more importantly, what I have the ability now is to actually flow document attachments through the transaction process. So for instance, if I had for a customer a contract or a set of terms and conditions that are held as a document associated with that account, what I can now do, as then either a quote is created, a sales order is created, or any document that subsequently flows on from that customer's account, the attachment will also follow that flow through as well. And what you can also do, in this case I was talking about a set of terms and conditions, but it might be something that's relevant to how that order is being processed or a particular document format that they need, and as it's being processed through that flow, I have the ability to be able to edit the attachments within that flow as well to modify them depending on the document status or the particular type of document that I'm generating. So if we look at that, for instance, against a particular document, I'm going to go into sales transaction entry. I'm going to pick up an order. I'm going to go to the end of the process here. I'm going to have a look at my document attachments. And to actually attach a document in, if I, for instance, pick up an example here. So there's my document here. It gives me the time and date stamp that's associated with it, the origin, and because I've checked that box to allow document flow, that will now allow that document, so as that document becomes an order, moves from an order to an invoice and so on and so forth, this particular document will actually go through it. So I go and preview that. It's a standard Word template and it's actually the customer's document within there. The other thing that we can do now within document attachments as well, you have the ability to be able to scan documents and link those directly through to a transaction. Previously that was limited to a single page at a time. We now have the ability to be able to scan multiple pages and link those automatically through to a particular transaction. For those that are using projects, there is the ability now to have document attachment for project expenses. So for instance, receipts and so on and so forth can be scanned in and they can be attached against a project expense to simplify and streamline all of that process. A couple of other points that I'm just going to talk around because they're on a more technical basis. We're now able to have configurable open data service points. So what that means is that any tool, whether it's a business intelligence tool such as Power BI or a third-party application, you can use the open data protocol and that will define a data model and a protocol that will allow that application to access any information that's then exposed by that data source. So in principle, it's a more streamlined way of connecting third-party applications through to Dynamics GP. And what you can also do with that is you can have that data service as a separate installation from Dynamics GP. So therefore you can have a user who might not have access to Dynamics GP through the standard client, whether that's the web or the full client, but need access to the data that's contained within there through, for instance, Power BI or another reporting tool or another third-party application, and the open data protocol enables you to do that as well. On another layer, one of the fundamental things across GP 2015, particularly the R2 release, and therefore GP 2016 as well, is to move to a true service-based architecture. And now we're getting into more of a development environment, but once again it moves around this whole principle of taking applications that maybe have been developed internally or a third-party application and fully integrating them in a streamlined manner through to Dynamics GP. Okay, moving on to some features within the financial series. So if I have a look, I'm going to move to the financials area. And I'm going to have a look at budgets. Now, for some time now, we've had the ability to be able to use the budget for Excel Wizard, and I don't know how many of you are actually using that on a regular basis. However, one of the fundamental issues was that if you were to create multiple iterations of the same budget spreadsheet or cut down versions and then pass those out to users within the organization and they enter their budget, they had to stay very, very strictly within that template. And also, if they added a line in, added an account in, then the import would just fail. Now what we have the ability to be able to do, and this is true Blue Peter fashion, got one that I've already created. I'm going to use that same import based on the spreadsheet, the Excel file that I've generated, bring in the information from that worksheet, select finish, and it runs through my standard import routine. Sneakily, what I've done within this spreadsheet is I've added a row in with an account that doesn't actually exist within Dynamics GP. And the new feature that they brought in within the budget for Excel is an exception report. And that exception report will review the data that's actually come through. So if I have a look here, and there's my exception report, and the sneaky account that I put into the spreadsheet, it will throw out and say, actually this account doesn't exist, but it will still bring the information through for the rest of the budget. One of the other new features as well, if I just pick up a standard batch, and if I now go to print, and I'll print a screen, is the ability to have a Word template for batch approval. So rather than it being a Dynamics GP a report or a report writer report, we've now got Word templates for batch approval within the GL, receivables and payables, meaning that so when you've configured your workflow, and those workflow options have been within Dynamics GP for the previous 2 or 3 versions, when you configure that workflow, someone wants to go and see the batch edit list, they're not restricted down to running a report writer report. There is a Word template that gives a greater capability to interact with that document. Something else that has been added into the financial section is the ability to be able to, and if I just choose company within here, I'm going to just go into the company setup and have a look at the options. I can now use date effective tax and tax dates. And if I use date effective tax, so in effect what I'm doing here is I will say that this particular tax rate is valid from this date to this date. I can choose when I'm doing that what date I want to take from the document, whether it's the tax date, the posting date, or the document date. So if I go through and have a look at my tax detail information, if I pick up my UK VAT on purchases, I now have date effective tax rates, so I can say that from this date to this date, this percentage of tax is relevant, from this date to this date, this percentage of tax is relevant, which is absolutely fantastic. There have been a number of additional features that have been added in over GP 2015 Release 2 and GP 2016 related to financials. So for instance, within analytical accounting, we can now set directly against the user role themselves, against the account. We can choose to set up and configure whether a user has access to that particular node. Also within receivables, it will now automatically post cash deposits. And in payables as well, if I go through to purchasing within here, against my payables batch, so against my select checks, if I give this batch a name, okay, I can choose within here to actually pay now by credit card, and the payment by credit card will then create the appropriate purchase invoice and configure that document for me automatically. I can also, I'm going to come on to this, but I can also do a purchasing prepayment batch as well. Okay, Moving on to, let me cancel that, let me delete that batch. Moving on to some of the new features within the supply chain series. Previously, I'm going to stick within purchasing, and in fact, actually, I'm going to show you this within sales. For GP 2015, there was introduced a purchasing all-in-one view, and that's now been also included with GP 2016 in sales as well. So in this particular instance, if I pull information through to for a particular customer, so I'm going to pull up everything with our long and faithful account Aaron Fitz. I now have the ability to see within one screen all the quotes, all the orders, all the invoices, cash receipts, any credit notes that are associated within here. And if I have a look at the options, this is where I can choose what I want to see within here. So for instance, on my orders and back orders, do I just want to see sales orders, or do I want to see back orders as well? Same applies with invoices and fulfillment orders. Same applies with other charges as well. And as I actually add those in, then my windows are refreshed and my additional information is shown within here. If I want to view further information associated with a document, I can choose to flick the arrow there and it'll give me a snapshot of the information that's related to that document. If I want to drill down on the document, it'll take me directly to the document within here. If I've got more documents that are related to a particular transaction type, all I have to do is flick through, choose to see the next 5, see the previous 5. I can then choose also to filter direct within here, so I could choose based on the document number, document status, the salesperson, the master number, and so on and so forth. So I can filter by each individual column, and rather than having multiple views, and actually in all honesty, before either of these views were created, most people would actually use SmartList to do this, but now you have everything generated and created directly within one window. Okay, another thing, just moving back to purchasing. If I look at my purchase order, and if I pick a purchase order within here, I can now choose to generate a prepayment for the entire purchase order. So if I just drill down, once again in true Blue Peter fashion, this is one that I created earlier. I can choose my prepayment account, and then obviously that will go through, as I showed you before, when you run your select checks routine, it can go through as a prepayment batch, which will obviously collate all of those together and run that as a payment batch through. Why this is important: previously functionality within here would only allow you to generate a prepayment for the subtotal. It will not allow you to generate a prepayment for any other miscellaneous charges such as freight, and also more importantly the tax element that's associated within there. And sticking with purchasing, I'm kind of linking to project accounting a little bit here as well. One of the features, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on project accounting. One of the fundamental features, as you're aware, back in 2013, purchase requisitions were included within the product, and there is a full workflow capability around the purchase requisition side through to purchase invoice and so on and so forth. But now I have the ability to be able to assign project information against a requisition, so that can be used fully within there. Same applies with the project time and expense. I think I mentioned this before, but within the project time and expense, I can actually within the expense configuration. I've got my document attachments, as I mentioned. I can also add a unit cost field in the employee expense window. So in effect, what we've done here within this is that the item field has been now renamed to cost category. The billing field is renamed to bill type, and the amount field is renamed to purchases. And then they've added in new fields, a unit cost and a unit of measure, so that they relate directly to a project configuration. As you'd expect within, and I'm really just touching on some of the key areas within here, but there have been a whole raft of additions to HR and also through to payroll. Other functionalities, the Scotia Bank EFT format has actually been added in within here now. But then within the reports themselves, the whole raft of new reports that have been added in, and fundamentally some of these came in through 2015 release 2, and then also added to directly within Dynamics GP 2016. So for instance, some of that capabilities that were added into GP 2015, so previously you only were able to add email configuration on the standard purchase order and sales order document types. But now what you can do is you can add that through to the short document, the long document, or the other format, meaning that you can actually configure your templates and therefore your email configuration type associated with that. From a license perspective, also there's been a self-service user type that's been added in. And directly within the general ledger, if I go through to look at an inquiry, and if I look at a summary inquiry now, I'll just pick up an account. Same summary window that we've had before, whereas now if I actually drill down on a particular section within that to go down to the detail, it now includes any open and any historical information associated with that particular period or that particular area that I'm looking for, rather than you having to choose whether you're looking at historical information or whether you're looking at open information, and having that extra step within that drill down. Okay, I mean, that was a quick snapshot view of some of the new features within Dynamics GP 2016, and some of the ones that I would really like to point out is the use of the web client. Now with the HTML5 capabilities and the true Active Directory integration also through to, for instance, Power BI, it makes deployment of Dynamics GP significantly easier, no longer having to run through install scripts on individual machines. You point someone through to a browser, and then they have the ability to be able to use that across multiple browser types. So for instance, if someone's using a Mac, they can access through GP through the web client using Safari, which is something that's always been a sticking point in the past. And the other one that I really like to point out to again is the introduction of Power BI. What we'll probably do is run a separate session on Power BI in general, because it's relevant to all of our clients who are using not just the Dynamics products, whether it's AX, GP, CRM, NAV, but also through to a whole raft of other solutions that you're using within your organization. Okay, I'm going to pause it there. Thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you very much for your patience. We've got time for a couple of questions if required, and at the end of this webinar there'll be a little survey that's been sent out by our marketing team. It's just 5 questions, and if you can provide our feedback, any feedback, that would be fantastic, because we're looking to do more of these but also streamline them and improve them as we're going along. Any questions? Okay, fantastic. Once again, thank you very much for your attendance, and we look forward to seeing you next time.